What happens when the man you've raised from obscurity betrays you at the peak of your struggle? She gave him everything, her time, her money, her dreams. Yet when her body failed her, he turned to another. She built him up from nothing, sacrificed her own comfort, and believed in his dreams. But when she asked for a simple favor, a car to ease her pain, he gave it to another woman. Betrayed, humiliated, and left with her children, Cindy Adeyemi faced the ultimate test of strength. A devoted wife built a man's fortune, endured his betrayal, and watched a mistress claim what wasn't hers until justice came quietly, but devastatingly, for all who dared to mock her patience. The Lagos sun was merciless that afternoon, beating down on the white walls of St. Augustine's Specialist Hospital. Cindy adjusted her nurse's cap, tucking a stray braid behind her ear as she walked briskly across the hospital courtyard. She had just finished a grueling 12-hour shift in the surgical ward. Her uniform was spotless, her steps graceful despite the exhaustion that tugged at her ankles. Cindy had worked at St. Augustine's for 5 years, and in that time, she had gained a reputation for her dedication and compassion. Patients whispered blessings to her name. Her colleagues admired her. Yet beyond the smiles she offered at patients' bedsides, Cindy carried a quiet loneliness. At 29, she had not yet married. Suitors had come, some wealthy, some influential, but Cindy's sharp eyes always saw beyond surface appearances. Money and prestige didn't move her. She longed for sincerity, for a man with vision. That day, however, her path was about to cross with someone who seemed, on the surface, the very opposite of what society thought she deserved. The hospital was close to the bustling Oberland market, and Cindy often passed through on her way home. The market was noisy, crowded with traders calling out their prices, women balancing basins of tomatoes on their heads, and Okada riders weaving recklessly through the chaos. She stopped by the butchery section, intending to buy meat for her mother's pepper soup. That was when she first noticed him. Connell stood behind a rough wooden counter, cleaver in hand, chopping beef with practiced ease. He was tall, his broad shoulders stretching the thin fabric of his worn t-shirt. His face bore the kind of rugged handsomeness that didn't beg for attention but demanded it nonetheless. His eyes, sharp, intelligent but weary, caught Cindy's for a brief second before he looked away. "Madam, where'n you go by?" Another butcher called out to Cindy, waving a blood-stained hand. But Cindy's attention lingered on Connell. There was something about the way he moved, the precision of his cuts, the quiet focus in a noisy environment. Unlike the other butchers who shouted for customers, Connell worked silently, allowing his work to speak for him. "I'll take 2 kilos of beef," Cindy said, her voice directed at him. He looked up again, a bit surprised that she had chosen him instead of the others. Wordlessly, he selected the best cuts, wrapped them neatly, and handed the parcel to her. "How much?" she asked. He told her the price. Fair, not inflated. She handed him the cash and waited for her change. But instead of hurrying, Cindy asked, "You've worked here long?" Connell hesitated, clearly not used to customers lingering for conversation. 3 years, he said finally. His voice was deep, steady. "You don't seem like the type who enjoys shouting like the others." A flicker of a smile crossed his lips. "I believe if you do good work, people will always come. No need to shout." Cindy nodded, impressed. She thanked him and left, but something about him stayed in her mind long after she returned home. The following week, Cindy returned to the market, this time intentionally seeking Connell's stall. She watched as he served customers with quiet efficiency. When the crowd thinned, she stepped closer. "You again," Connell said, his tone holding a hint of amusement. "Yes, me again," Cindy replied lightly. "Your beef is the only one that made my mother compliment me." That earned a small laugh from him. "Then I'm glad my work has added something to your home." Cindy tilted her head, studying him. "You're educated, aren't you?" Connell's eyes widened slightly. "What makes you say that?" "The way you speak. The way you think. It's not ordinary." He sighed, leaning on his counter. "I finished secondary school with good results. even gained admission once, but there was no money for fees. My father died early. I had to drop out and start hustling. This butchery feeds my mother and younger siblings. Cindy's chest tightened. She admired his honesty, his sense of responsibility. Many men would have surrendered to bitterness, but he had carried his burden with dignity. "You're very intelligent," she said softly. "Do you still dream of going back to school?" His laugh was dry. "Dreams don't pay bills, nurse. I see your uniform, you work at the hospital. For people like me, life is survival, not dreams." Cindy studied him for a long moment. She felt something stirring inside her, a conviction. She didn't know why, but she believed this man's story was not meant to end at a butcher's table. Over the next few weeks, their conversations grew. Cindy learned more about Connell's life. His sacrifices, his frustrations, his secret love for mathematics and problem-solving. She discovered that as a boy, he had once dreamed of building bridges and roads. One evening, after a particularly exhausting shift, Cindy sat with him at the edge of the market while traders packed up for the day. "Connell," she said carefully, "what if you went back to school? Chose a course you love, studied properly?" He turned sharply to her, disbelief etched on his face. "With what money? My family barely survives on what I earn here." "I'll sponsor you," Cindy said simply. "Any course you want. Just promise me you won't waste the opportunity." Connell stared at her as though she had spoken another language. "You, a woman I barely know, would invest in me like that? Why?" "Because I see something in you," Cindy replied firmly. "Something bigger than this market. You're not ordinary, Connell. You have a vision, and I won't watch it die in you." His voice was husky when he finally spoke. "No one has ever believed in me like that before." "Then let me be the first," Cindy said, her eyes unwavering. It started with classes at a local preparatory center. Connell studied at night after long days at the market, and Cindy often quizzed him with flashcards in her small apartment. She cooked for him, encouraged him when he doubted himself, and celebrated every small victory. Slowly, affection blossomed. Connell, who had always carried himself with quiet pride, found himself softening under Cindy's encouragement. Cindy, who had always been strong for others, discovered how safe she felt in Connell's presence. Their love was not loud or dramatic. It was built on long conversations, shared struggles, and unshakable trust. When he was finally admitted into university to study civil engineering, Cindy was the one who accompanied him to register, her smile brighter than his own. Connell took her hands and whispered, "I promise you, Cindy, I will not fail you. I'll make you proud." "You already have," she replied, her heart swelling. By the time the semester began, everyone in Cindy's life knew about Connell. Some friends mocked her. "A nurse with a butcher. Cindy, you deserve better," they sneered. But Cindy held her head high. She wasn't choosing Connell for who he was now but for who she believed he could become. And in her heart, she knew she was sowing into a future neither of them could yet imagine. The first time Connell walked into the gates of Lagos State University, Cindy could hardly contain her excitement. She had accompanied him that morning, her hand clasped in his as they navigated the bustling campus filled with freshers. Students were streaming past them, some with wide eyes filled with hope, others already carrying themselves with the confidence of people who belonged. Connell paused just inside the main walkway, his eyes scanning the rows of tall buildings, the large auditorium, the green lawns where students sat in clusters with textbooks and laughter. He had seen schools before, but never as a student, never as someone stepping into possibility. "Cindy," he whispered, almost afraid to believe it. "I'm really here." She squeezed his hand gently. "Yes, you are. And you belong here just as much as anyone else." For Cindy, the decision to sponsor Connell was not just an act of love, it was an act of faith. Her nurse's salary wasn't extravagant, but it was stable. She cut down on luxuries, budgeting carefully, saving every kobo she could. Her colleagues began to notice the difference, how she no longer joined them for weekend outings, how she wore her old uniforms longer than usual, how she carried packed food from home instead of buying lunch at the hospital cafeteria. "Cindy, are you saving for a car?" her friend Ngozi teased one afternoon during their lunch break. Cindy smiled faintly. Something like that. In truth, she was saving for textbooks, accommodation, and fees. Kunnal's needs. Kunnal, for his part, didn't take her sacrifices lightly. He kept his butcher job during holidays and weekends, funneling every naira he earned into feeding his younger siblings so Cindy wouldn't have to carry that burden too. At night, after chopping meat for hours, he sat hunched over his borrowed desk lamp in a small student hostel, studying equations, diagrams, and engineering principles until sleep forced his eyes shut. There were nights when Cindy, coming home from a long shift, would find Kunnal still awake, red-eyed and weary, scribbling calculations on scrap paper. She would bring him food, set it beside him, and massage his shoulders gently. "You push yourself too hard," she murmured once, brushing her hand across his tense neck. He shook his head. "No, Cindy. You push yourself too hard. I cannot let your sacrifices go to waste." Her heart melted each time he spoke like that. But the road was not without challenges. Some of Cindy's relatives criticized her choice. "A whole nurse spending money on a butcher," her aunt scoffed during a family gathering. "You're wasting your time. What if he fails? What if he runs away with your money?" But Cindy stood firm. "I know who he is. He won't fail." Even her mother worried. "Cindy, love is good, but be wise. Men change when success comes. Then let him change into a better man," Cindy replied softly. Kunnal proved her faith right. Within his first year, he was already topping his class. His lecturers noticed his sharp mind, his ability to grasp complex concepts quickly, and his discipline. He became known among his peers as the student who had once been a butcher but now solved engineering problems with ease. One afternoon, after receiving a particularly high score in structural analysis, Kunnal called Cindy, his voice trembling with excitement. "Cindy, I got the highest mark in the entire department." Her laughter rang like music over the phone. I told you you were made for this." Those victories fueled them both. Each semester, Kunnal excelled, and each semester, Cindy worked double shifts to keep everything afloat. Sometimes she fell asleep in the staff room, her body drained, but she never complained. When she looked at Kunnal's determination, she found her strength renewed. By Kunnal's second year, their bond had deepened beyond measure. They spent weekends together in Cindy's modest apartment, cooking jollof rice, talking about the future, dreaming about the life they would build. "Someday," Kunnal said one evening as they sat on the balcony watching the city lights flicker in the distance, "I'll give you a house bigger than this, with space for our children to run. You won't work so hard anymore." Cindy smiled, resting her head on his shoulder. "As long as we're together, I don't care if it's a palace or a single room." Her words touched him deeply, but in his heart, he silently vowed to repay her sacrifice 1,000-fold. Despite their happiness, whispers followed them. At the hospital, Cindy overheard colleagues mocking her behind her back. "She's wasting her money on a butcher-turned-student. As if education will wash away poverty from his skin." At the market, traders teased Kunnal. "Ah, engineer butcher. Your Madam Day sponsor you, ABI. Better hold 'em tight before she find real husband." Kunnal bore the ridicule quietly, but Cindy sometimes cried in private. Not because she regretted her choices, but because society was cruel to women who loved unconventionally. Still, each time doubt crept in, she reminded herself of the fire in Kunnal's eyes, the brilliance in his mind, and the way he treated her with respect no man had ever shown her. By the time Kunnal reached his final year, the pressure was immense. He was leading group projects, spending nights in the engineering labs, and preparing for his final project, a design for a flood-resistant bridge that could be built cheaply in rural communities. Cindy became his biggest cheerleader, proofreading his reports, helping him organize presentations, even cooking meals for his group when they pulled all-nighters. One evening, after weeks of stress, Connell collapsed on her couch, too tired to even eat. Cindy sat beside him, brushing his hair gently. "You've come so far, Connell. I'm proud of you." He opened his eyes weakly. "I couldn't have done any of this without you. You did the work. I only held the torch." "No," he said firmly, taking her hand. "You gave me life. Cindy, when this is over, I'll marry you. That's a promise." Her heart swelled. She had never doubted his love, but hearing the words spoken with such conviction filled her with joy. The day of graduation was one of the brightest of their lives. The campus was alive with music, laughter, and proud families. Connell stood tall in his graduation gown, cap tilted slightly, his certificate clutched in hand. His mother wept openly, blessing Cindy for believing in her son when no one else did. Cindy's eyes brimmed with tears as she watched Connell walk across the stage to receive his degree. Her heart swelled with pride. She remembered the first day she saw him at the butchery, the way he cut meat silently while others shouted. She had seen potential then, and now she was witnessing it bloom. After the ceremony, Connell pulled Cindy into his arms, uncaring of the crowd. "Cindy, we made it," he whispered against her hair. "We did," she replied, her voice trembling with emotion. "This is only the beginning." Neither of them could have known then how long the road ahead still was, how success would not come immediately, how patience would be tested again. But for that moment, they allowed themselves to bask in the sweetness of victory. Connell had kept his promise not to fail. And Cindy, in her quiet, unyielding way, had proven that love and sacrifice could rewrite destinies. Graduation was supposed to be the beginning of everything. For weeks after Connell received his degree in civil engineering, Cindy brimmed with excitement. She believed jobs would line up quickly for a brilliant young man like him. She even helped him buy a neat suit with her savings so he could attend interviews with confidence. The suit hung proudly in their small apartment, a symbol of hope. But days turned into weeks, and weeks into months. Hope began to wear thin. Connell applied to every construction firm, every government agency, every consultancy that had a vacancy. He typed CVs, attached photocopies of his degree, and hand-delivered applications across Lagos. First he was optimistic. "They'll call me," he told Cindy as he ironed his suit one morning. "A degree like mine won't be ignored." But as months passed with no response, his voice lost conviction. Each day, Cindy saw him leave the apartment determined, only to return with shoulders slumped and eyes clouded with disappointment. The rejection letters, when they came at all, were polite but crushing. "We regret to inform you." Some firms didn't even acknowledge his applications. Others demanded experience, a cruel irony for someone fresh from university. Cindy did her best to keep his spirits alive. She made his favorite meals, encouraged him with Bible verses, and reminded him of how far he had come. "Connell, you went from butchery to this. Don't forget that. The same God who brought you this far will finish what he started." But even her words sometimes struggled against the growing silence in their home. Cindy often found him staring out the window, lost in thought, his fingers absently tracing invisible lines on the table as if drawing bridges no one would build. Outside their walls, society was not kind. Cindy's colleagues began to whisper louder. "Isn't that nurse still carrying that man on her head?" one asked during a lunch break. "Graduated for how long now, and still jobless?" Some of Connell's old market acquaintances mocked him too. "Engineer butcher," they jeered when they saw him pass. "No contract yet. Maybe you should come back to cut meat for us." Each word stabbed at his pride. Connell began avoiding the market altogether, unwilling to face the ridicule. Cindy felt the weight too. Family members who once warned her against wasting money on a butcher now felt justified. Her aunt called one evening. "Cindy, I told you. See now, after all your sacrifice, what do you have to show? Don't let a man without future drag you down." Cindy hung up the call, her hands trembling with anger. She looked at Connell, who had overheard, his face pale with shame. She walked to him, lifted his chin and said firmly, "Kunal, don't listen to them. Your story isn't finished." The first year after graduation was painful. The second was heavier. By the third year, despair had settled in their home like an uninvited guest. Cindy's salary, though steady, was stretched thin. Between rent, feeding, and supporting Kunal's family back in the village, there was little left to save. Kunal stopped applying as frequently. Each rejection had chipped away at his confidence. He began waking up later, sometimes skipping meals, retreating into silence. One night, after Cindy returned from an exhausting shift, she found him sitting in the dark. No light, no sound. Just him staring at the wall. Her heart broke. She sat beside him, took his hand and whispered, "Kunal, talk to me." "I failed you," he said hoarsely. "You believed in me. You spent your money, your energy, your life. And what have I given you back? Nothing." Tears filled Cindy's eyes. "Kunal, don't you ever say that. You gave me love. You gave me respect. You gave me hope. Those are not nothing." But in her own heart, a quiet fear grew. What if the world never gave Kunal the chance to prove himself? It was in the third year that a small opportunity came. Not the one they prayed for, but one they couldn't ignore. Kunal's old friend from the market told him about an opening for security guards at St. Augustine's Specialist Hospital, the same hospital where Cindy worked. The pay was small, but at least it was something. When Kunal mentioned it to Cindy, his voice was low, almost ashamed. "Cindy, there's a security job at your hospital. I don't know if—" "Take it," she interrupted gently. His eyes widened. "But me? A graduate, a civil engineer, wearing uniform to open gates." "Kunal," she said softly, "dignity is not in the job but in the heart. Work is work. Do it while you wait for better." He searched her eyes for judgment but found only love. And so, with heavy steps, Kunal put aside his pride and applied. Kunal's first day as a security guard was surreal. He wore the dark blue uniform, cap tilted slightly, baton at his side. He stood at the hospital gates where Cindy often passed, directing cars, greeting staff, checking IDs. Some nurses recognized him. "Isn't this Cindy's boyfriend? The one she sent to school?" They giggled as they whispered. Kunal heard the murmurs but forced himself to stand tall. Cindy walked past with her head high, pretending not to notice the whispers. Later that evening, she came to the gate with a small food flask for him. "I know you didn't eat well today," she said. He looked at her, his throat tight with emotion. "How do you carry me so easily, Cindy? I don't deserve you." She touched his cheek. "You do. You always will." Despite the humiliation, there were moments of unexpected grace. Patients and visitors appreciated Kunal's politeness and calmness. Unlike some guards who barked orders, Kunal treated everyone with dignity. Slowly, even hospital staff began to respect him. One afternoon, a doctor asked him, "Why are you a security guard? You speak like an educated man." Kunal smiled faintly. "Because sometimes life puts you in waiting rooms before opening the right doors." Through it all, Cindy remained his anchor. They shared simple joys. Eating roasted corn together after shifts, walking hand in hand through the quiet streets at night, praying together before bed. One evening, Kunal confessed, "Cindy, I fear that maybe God has forgotten me." She held his hands firmly. "No, Kunal. God doesn't forget. Sometimes, He waits for the right time to showcase His miracles." Her words became their mantra. Neither of them knew then that a storm was brewing in their city, one that would wash away old structures and open doors that had remained locked for years. It would come in the form of heavy rains, swollen rivers, and collapsed bridges. It would bring destruction, yes. But it would also bring opportunity. An opportunity that would finally lift Kunal out of the shadows and into the destiny Cindy had always seen in him. For now, though, they waited. They endured. And they held each other tightly in the darkness, believing that light would come. The rains began quietly that year, as they always did. Heavy clouds gathered over Lagos. The the skies rumbling with distant thunder. People welcomed the showers, believing they would bring relief from the suffocating heat. But what started as blessings soon turned to destruction. 4 days, the downpour did not cease. The streets flooded, gutters overflowed, houses crumbled, and roads vanished under angry rivers of muddy water. News reports spoke of families displaced, schools destroyed, bridges collapsed. Entire neighborhoods became islands cut off from the city. By the 3rd week of flooding, Lagos had changed. What once bustled with life now groaned under the weight of devastation. At St. Augustine's Specialist Hospital, Cindy and her colleagues worked around the clock. Flood victims poured in. Children coughing from pneumonia, men with injuries from collapsed buildings, women weeping for lost homes. Cindy had no time to rest. She moved from one ward to another, dressing wounds, calming terrified patients, holding the hands of children who cried for food and shelter. Her own heart ached, but she knew she had to remain strong. Outside, Connell stood at the hospital gate in his security uniform, rain dripping down his cap. He directed ambulances through the muddy driveway, waded into the water to help carry patients out of cars, and even comforted families stranded in the storm. Though his job description was simple, guard the gate, check IDs, Connell did far more. His presence was steady, his voice calm, his strength unshaken. In those desperate days, people began to see him differently. By the time the rains subsided, more than 80% of Lagos infrastructure had been damaged. Schools, bridges, markets, ruined. The government declared a state of emergency. Radio stations buzzed with announcements. Federal government has released funds for immediate reconstruction projects. Tender applications are now open for qualified contractors to rebuild schools, hospitals, and roads in affected areas. Connell sat with Cindy one evening, listening to the broadcast crackle through their small radio. His hands tightened around the cup of tea she had made for him. "Tenders," he murmured. "This is it. This is what I've been waiting for." Cindy's eyes lit up. "Yes, Connell. You're a civil engineer. This is your time." "But Cindy," he said quietly, doubt creeping into his voice, "those tenders will go to big companies. People with money, with connections. Me. I'm just a security guard." She leaned forward, gripping his hands. "You are not just a security guard. You are an engineer with brains, vision, and discipline. Connections or not, we will apply. Let's try. You have nothing to lose." The following weeks were a blur of work and determination. Cindy became Connell's secretary, editor, and cheerleader all in one. After her hospital shifts, she sat with him at their small table, typing documents on her old laptop. She formatted his CV, helped draft his proposal, and combed through every requirement on the government's tender portal. Connell poured his engineering knowledge into the proposal. He outlined innovative designs for cost-effective school buildings that could withstand flooding. He sketched floor plans, added estimates, and referenced global case studies. 2 primary schools and 1 creche, he muttered, working late into the night. "If I can get this tender, Cindy, I'll show the world what I can do." Sometimes he faltered, shaking his head. "What if they laugh at me? What if my proposal never even gets read?" Each time, Cindy steadied him. "Then we try again. But I believe in you, Connell. And you must believe in yourself." When they finally submitted the application, they prayed together, holding hands tightly. Then came the waiting, long, agonizing weeks filled with uncertainty. Connell continued his security work, standing at the hospital gate while his mind drifted to thoughts of contracts, site plans, and construction materials. Cindy continued her nursing shifts, whispering silent prayers each time she passed him at the gate. One evening, as they shared dinner of rice and beans, Connell said softly, "Cindy, if I get this tender, the first house I'll build is for us. No more small flats. Real home. One in the city, and another in the village." Cindy smiled, her eyes misty. "I'll hold you to that." It was a Tuesday morning when Connell's phone rang. He almost ignored it, thinking it was a wrong number. But when he picked up, his heart froze. "Good morning, Mr. Colonel Adeyemi," the voice said formally. "This is the Lagos State Ministry of Works. We are pleased to inform you that your proposal for the construction of 2 primary schools and 1 creche has been approved. Congratulations." Colonel nearly dropped the phone. What? Approved? You mean? I got it. Yes, sir. You will receive an official letter by email. Please prepare for orientation and signing of contracts. Colonel ended the call, his body trembling. He turned to Cindy, who was just coming out of the bedroom. "Cindy, we got it," he shouted. "We got the tender." For a moment she thought he was joking. But when she saw the tears streaming down his face, she realized it was real. She screamed, dropped the plate she was holding, and threw her arms around him. They laughed, they cried, they fell to their knees in gratitude. The weeks that followed were like a dream. Newspapers carried lists of awarded contracts, and Colonel's name was there. Adeyemi Constructions. Friends who once mocked him now called with congratulations. Former butchery colleagues shook their heads in disbelief. Cindy watched with quiet pride as her husband-to-be, no longer just engineer butcher or security guard, began attending government meetings, rubbing shoulders with established contractors. Though his company was new, his innovative designs had impressed the selection committee. He was officially tasked with rebuilding 2 schools and 1 creche in flood-affected areas. One evening as they sat together, Colonel took Cindy's hands and said, "I told you I'd build us houses one day. Now I'll build schools for children too. And all of this is because you believed in me." Her eyes filled with tears. "Colonel, you worked for this. You deserve it." But in her heart, she silently thanked God for proving her faith right. With his new position secured, Colonel began making plans. One of the first was to formalize his union with Cindy. "You carried me through my lowest days," he said one night, holding her close. "Now I want the world to see you as my wife, not just in spirit but by law and by tradition. Will you marry me, Cindy?" Tears streamed down her face as she nodded. "Yes, Colonel. 1,000 times yes." As Cindy lay in bed that night, joy filling her heart, she could not imagine the shadows waiting in the years ahead. She saw only the man she loved, the future they would build, and the children they would raise. For Colonel, the flood had washed away years of despair, opening doors that once seemed locked forever. For Cindy, it had confirmed that her sacrifices were not in vain. Neither knew that success would bring not only blessings, but also trials that would test their marriage, their love, and their very souls. But for now, in the quiet of their small apartment, they celebrated the dawn of a new beginning. The wedding was nothing short of glorious. Though Cindy had always dreamed of something small and intimate, Colonel insisted they celebrate in style. "Cindy," he said with a grin as they browsed fabrics in Balagan Market, "you walked with me through shame. Now I want the world to see you shine." The ceremony was held in her hometown, a blend of Christian solemnity and Yoruba tradition. Cindy wore a gown of soft lace and satin for the church service, her veil falling gracefully over her radiant face. Later she changed into a dazzling iro and buba, shimmering with beads and embroidery, her geli tied high like a queen's crown. Colonel, in his agbada of royal blue, looked every inch the successful man he had become. Family and friends gathered, feasting on jollof rice, umla, and goat meat stew. Drummers played bata rhythms as dancers swayed in colorful ankara. The air was thick with joy, laughter, and the scent of roasted suya. As Cindy watched her husband dance, his face glowing with pride, her heart swelled. This was not the butcher boy she had once met in his blood-stained apron. This was a man transformed, an engineer, a dreamer, a builder of futures. True to his word, Colonel kept his promise. With part of the funds from his tender, he commissioned the building of 2 houses, one in Lagos, close to Cindy's hospital, and one in their ancestral village. The city home was a modern duplex with cream-colored walls and wide windows that let in the Lagos sun. The living room was spacious, with polished tiles that reflected light like a mirror. Cindy picked out the curtains herself, soft golds and creams that gave the home a warm glow. The village house, on the other hand, was a symbol of pride. It stood tall at the entrance of Connell's father's land, painted in deep terracotta with a wide veranda and carved wooden doors. Villagers passing by would pause to admire it, whispering, "See what engineer Connell has built." Cindy's heart nearly burst with joy when Connell walked her through each room. "This," he said, opening the door to a cozy space painted pale yellow, "will be our children's room. And this," he opened another larger room, "is where you'll rest after long days at the hospital." Every brick, every tile, every beam carried the weight of their journey together. Cindy felt as if she was finally walking inside a dream that had once seemed impossible. In the years that followed, the blessings multiplied. Cindy gave birth to their first child, a boy named David, strong and healthy. Connell could not contain his pride. He carried the child everywhere, showing him off to family, colleagues, and even strangers in the market. 2 years later came Blessing, their first daughter. Then, after another 2 years, a second son, Emmanuel. Each child brought new laughter to the home, tiny footsteps pattering across the tiled floor, giggles echoing through the hallways, toys scattered in every corner. Cindy adored motherhood. Even when exhaustion weighed her down, she found strength in her children's smiles. At night, she would rock them to sleep, humming lullabies her mother once sang to her. Connell, though often busy managing projects, always made time for bedtime stories and playful wrestling matches. The family had everything Cindy once prayed for: a loving husband, beautiful children, and homes that reflected their hard work. To outsiders, theirs was the perfect household. But beneath the surface, little cracks began to appear. Connell, once content to spend evenings with Cindy, started coming home later, blaming meetings with contractors or site inspections. Cindy, though tired from her nursing shifts and caring for the children, noticed the change. One evening, she confronted him gently. "Connell, these late nights worry me. You hardly eat dinner with us anymore." He sighed, rubbing his temples. "Cindy, you don't understand. This business is demanding. If I don't put in the work, others will overtake me." She placed her hand on his. "I understand, Connell. But please don't forget what matters most. Us, your family." He kissed her forehead. "Never, my love. You are the reason I work so hard." His words soothed her, but in her heart, she couldn't shake a growing unease. After the birth of their third child, Cindy began to notice troubling symptoms. Walking long distances became painful. Standing for too long left her legs weak, as though they could no longer carry her weight. At first, she dismissed it as post-pregnancy exhaustion. But the problem persisted, worsening with each passing month. Doctors ran tests and confirmed that a rare complication from childbirth had damaged her lower spine. "You may never fully regain your mobility," one specialist explained. "Prolonged standing or walking could worsen your condition." The news devastated Cindy. Nursing had been her life, her passion. To give it up felt like losing a part of her identity. But the pain left her no choice. Reluctantly, she handed in her resignation at the hospital. Connell was supportive at first. "Don't worry, Cindy," he said, holding her as she cried. "You've worked enough. Focus on the children now. I'll provide." And he did. Financially, nothing was lacking. But for Cindy, something irreplaceable had been taken away. She tried to hide her sadness, but there were nights when she wept silently, her pillow damp with tears. Life without work meant Cindy was home most of the time. Trips to the market, the children's school runs, even visits to church became difficult. Walking drained her strength, and taking public transport was a nightmare. One evening, as Connell returned from work, she gathered her courage. "Connell," she began softly, "I've never asked you for much. All these years, I worked without ever owning a car. But now, with my health, I really need one. Even a small one, just to ease the burden." He looked at her thoughtfully. "A car? You're right. You deserve it. I'll get you one." Relief washed over her. "Thank you, Connell. God bless you." For the first time in weeks, Cindy felt hopeful again. The car arrived 2 weeks later, a sleek silver Toyota Corolla. Cindy's heart leapt when she saw it parked in their driveway. She rushed outside, tears of joy already stinging her eyes. But her joy quickly soured. The car wasn't for her. Connell handed the keys not to Cindy, but to a young woman Cindy had never seen before. A woman with long braids, manicured nails, and a smile that curled with pride. "Connell," Cindy whispered, her voice trembling. "Who is this?" The woman smirked. Connell avoided Cindy's eyes. "This is a friend." "A friend," Cindy repeated, her chest tightening. "You bought her the car I asked for?" "After everything." Connell said nothing. Instead, he turned and walked back into the house, leaving Cindy standing in the driveway, humiliated, betrayed, her tears falling onto the dusty ground. That night when she confronted him, he shouted, "Don't question me, Cindy. You've had your turn. Let me live my life." He packed a bag and stormed out. Days turned into weeks, weeks into months. He never returned. Word spread quickly. Connell had moved in with a young woman. The whispers in church, the pitying glances from neighbors, the unanswered questions from her children. It was almost too much for Cindy to bear. Despite the betrayal, Cindy refused to crumble. She held her children close, telling them, "Your father loves you. He's just confused." She cooked their meals, helped with their homework, and prayed for strength each night. Inside, however, she felt a deep ache, not only for the husband she had lost to another woman, but for the sacrifices she had made to help him rise, only for him to abandon her when she needed him most. Little did Cindy know, this was only the beginning of trials that would shake her family to its core. The days that followed Connell's departure felt like a storm that would not pass. Cindy, once the proud wife of a respected engineer, suddenly found herself whispered about in every corner. At church, women who had once admired her now gave her pitying looks. At the market, traders murmured as she passed, their eyes following her with curiosity and judgment. "Na she way build that man up," someone muttered once, not knowing Cindy could hear. "See now, another woman don carry em away." Each word stung like a blade. Cindy tried to ignore them, but deep down she felt exposed, stripped of dignity. The young woman who had taken Connell from her was named Folake. Slim, fashionable, with skin the color of polished bronze and an aura of arrogance, she moved into Connell's life as though she had been there all along. Folake flaunted her new status with pride. She drove the car Cindy had begged for, wore gold bangles that clinked with every gesture, and posted pictures on social media of herself in fine restaurants with Connell. "Engineer and his queen," one caption read. Cindy's friends showed her the posts, their faces tight with anger. "See how she's mocking you," one said. But Cindy only shook her head. Let her enjoy. God sees everything. For Cindy, the hardest part was not her own humiliation, but the confusion in her children's eyes. David, now 7, often asked, "Mommy, why doesn't Daddy come home anymore? Did I do something wrong?" Blessing clung to Cindy's skirts, whispering, "I want Daddy to tuck me in like before." Little Emmanuel, too young to understand, would point at other children's fathers and ask, "Where's mine?" Each question tore at Cindy's heart. She tried to explain gently, "Daddy is busy with work," but the lies tasted bitter on her tongue. She could not bring herself to tell them the truth, that their father had chosen another woman over them. As Connell sank deeper into Folake's embrace, he seemed to forget the woman who had carried him through his struggles. Folake encouraged him to live extravagantly. He bought her designer handbags, took her on trips, and began neglecting not just Cindy, but also his extended family. In the village, elders shook their heads. "This boy has forgotten his roots," they said. "Marriage to a good woman has no meaning to him again." Cindy heard these things and remained silent. She refused to defend herself or curse Connell. Instead, she poured her energy into her children, determined they would not feel abandoned even if their father had walked away. One Sunday morning, Cindy gathered her courage and went to church, holding her children's hands. She wanted to show them stability, to prove their family was not broken beyond repair. But when she walked into the compound, whispers filled the air. Folake had come too, dressed in a flamboyant lace gown, Connell by her side. They entered with their heads held high, Connell even placing his arm around her shoulder. Cindy felt her knees weaken. She gripped David's hand tighter and forced herself to sit in the pew. Throughout the service, she could feel eyes darting between her and the couple in front. The sermon about faithfulness in marriage seemed to echo like thunder in her ears. Afterward, Folake deliberately crossed Cindy's path, her perfume strong, her smile taunting. "Good morning, Madam Nurse," she said sweetly. "I hope you're well." Cindy simply replied, "God bless you," and walked away with her children. She refused to let bitterness stain her lips. At home the silence grew heavier. Once, Connell's laughter filled their living room. Now, only the hum of the ceiling fan and the voices of children remained. Cindy often sat awake at night, her Bible open on her lap, tears streaming silently as she prayed. "Lord, I trusted him. Gave him everything. Why has he turned his back on us? Give me strength, Father. Don't let my children suffer." The more Connell distanced himself, the closer Cindy drew to God. Her faith became her anchor. Even when loneliness threatened to crush her, she clung to the belief that justice would come. Folake, however, basked in her false victory. She paraded herself at social gatherings, boasting of being the woman behind the man. She bore Connell 2 children in quick succession, and many began to assume Cindy was the forgotten past. "First wife or not," Folake would sneer in private conversations, "I'm the one he sleeps beside now. Paper marriage means nothing." Yet despite her outward confidence, Folake's foundation was shaky. Deep down she feared Cindy's quiet dignity. Unlike her, Cindy did not fight, did not shout, did not chase Connell. She simply endured with grace. And that grace unnerved Folake. The final straw came when Cindy heard from a neighbor that Connell had officially moved into a new home with Folake. She had suspected as much, but hearing it confirmed made her chest tighten with pain. Still she refused to fight. She told her children gently, "Daddy is staying elsewhere for now. But remember, he is still your father. Love him." Her friends scolded her. "Cindy, why are you so calm? That woman is enjoying what you built with your sweat." Cindy's reply was always the same. "If I fight Folake, people will say I am bitter. If I curse Connell, my children will suffer. Choose peace. God will fight for me." As years passed, Connell's life began to unravel. The businesses that once flourished started facing problems. Mismanaged funds, corrupt contractors, failed projects. Folake, who had encouraged his spending, offered no wisdom in managing the crises. Cindy, though far away, heard the rumors. "Engineer Connell's fortune is dwindling," people whispered. "That Sidechick has no head for business. He has forgotten the wife who built him." Yet Cindy did not rejoice in his decline. She continued to raise her children, teaching them never to hate their father. "Pray for him," she often said. "No matter what, he is still your blood." One rainy night, word came to Cindy that Connell had fallen gravely ill. His health had been deteriorating, worsened by stress and poor lifestyle choices. Folake rushed him to a hospital, but doctors shook their heads gravely. Cindy's children heard the news from neighbors before she could shield them. "Mommy, is Daddy going to die?" David asked, his voice trembling. Cindy hugged him tightly. "We don't know, my son. But we will pray for him." Days later, the inevitable happened. Colonel Adeyemi, once the butcher boy who became a celebrated engineer, passed away in Folake's arms. He left behind 2 families, 5 children, and a legacy tainted by betrayal. Folake immediately took charge of the burial arrangements. She ordered a grand casket, printed glossy posters, and began calling herself Mrs. Adeyemi publicly. She acted as though Cindy never existed, never mattered. But Cindy remained silent. She neither attended the meetings nor interfered with the plans. People began to wonder, had she truly accepted defeat? No one knew the storm she was quietly preparing. Cindy's silence was not weakness. It was wisdom. She knew the law was on her side, and that when the day of burial came, truth would speak louder than all of Folklake's arrogance. For years, Folklake had mocked her, paraded her pain, and stolen her joy. But the final chapter of Connell's story would not be written by a mistress. It would be written by his wife, the woman who had walked with him when he was nothing, the woman who bore his name legally, the woman who never left even when betrayed. And so, as the date of burial approached, Cindy quietly contacted the authorities. She would not fight with fists or words. She would fight with dignity, with law, and with truth. Folklake, still blind in her triumph, had no idea the humiliation that awaited her. The morning of Connell's burial dawned heavy with gray clouds. In Folklake's camp, the air buzzed with preparation. A large white canopy had been erected in front of her house, chairs neatly arranged for dignitaries, neighbors, and extended family. A brass band rehearsed at the corner, their trumpets and drums echoing down the street. Folklake moved about in a lavishly embroidered lace wrapper, her galley tall and proud. She had spared no expense. There was to be a grand farewell for her husband, a final display of the life she believed she had won. She supervised caterers dishing out steaming pots of jollof rice, fried plantain, and goat meat. She instructed ushers on how to seat important guests. Everything must be perfect, she declared, smiling with satisfaction. Today they will know I was the woman in Connell's life. But Folklake had underestimated the woman who had quietly been watching from the shadows. In her modest living room, Cindy dressed simply. A black gown, understated jewelry, and a scarf tied neatly over her head. Her children stood beside her, their small faces solemn. David clutched her hand tightly, while Blessing and Emmanuel leaned close, sensing the weight of the day. "Mommy," Blessing whispered, "are we really going to see Daddy today?" Cindy knelt to their level, her voice steady. "Yes, my children. Today we will say goodbye. But remember, no matter what anyone says, you are his blood. You are his legacy. And I am his wife." She rose slowly, her weak legs trembling, but her heart was firm. Outside, a police van waited. Cindy had quietly gone through the proper channels days before. As Connell's legal wife, she had full rights over his body and burial. When the officer in charge stepped into the room, he saluted respectfully. "Madam Adeyemi, are you ready?" She nodded. "Yes. Let's go." The burial had just begun when Cindy's convoy arrived. Folklake was seated in front, basking in the attention of guests, when the sound of police sirens cut through the music. Heads turned. Murmurs rose. Cindy stepped out slowly, supported by David on one side and Blessing on the other. The crowd gasped. Many had not expected her to show up at all. For years she had been silent, enduring humiliation. Today her silence broke. Folklake rose quickly, her face tightening. "What is she doing here?" she hissed. "This is my husband's burial." The police officer raised his hand. "Respect yourself, madam. We are here to ensure the lawful wife of Mr. Connell Adeyemi takes her rightful place." "Lawful wife?" Folklake scoffed. "I was the one by his side when he died. I am the one who carried his name with pride. She is nothing but a shadow of the past." Cindy stepped forward, her voice calm but firm. "You may have shared his bed, Folklake, but you never shared his vows. I am Mrs. Adeyemi, his only legal wife. And by law, the body belongs to me." Gasps rippled through the crowd. Some nodded in agreement. Others watched Folklake, waiting for her response. Folklake's bravado cracked. Her eyes darted from Cindy to the police, then to the coffin resting at the center of the gathering. She opened her mouth to argue, but her voice faltered. The officer produced official documents, marriage certificates, legal endorsements, proof of Cindy's position. "Madam Folklake, you have no claim," he announced loudly. "Step aside." The crowd buzzed louder now. "Ha! So Cindy is the real wife. All these years, and Folake was just the side chick. See how pride can destroy a woman. Folake's hands shook as she tried to steady herself. The humiliation burned hotter than fire. All her boasting, all her years of flaunting, now lay in ruins before her. As Cindy's children stood by their mother, the image was undeniable. The true family of Colonel Adeyemi. Folake stumbled back into her chair, her face pale, her chest heaving. Before long, tears streaked down her cheeks. The shame was too much to bear. Cindy did not gloat. She did not raise her voice or throw insults. Instead, she walked toward the coffin, placed her hand gently on it, and whispered a prayer. "Colonel, you were my husband, the father of my children. I forgive you for the pain you caused. Rest in peace." The crowd fell silent. In that moment, Cindy's dignity shone brighter than all of Folake's lace and jewelry. Her quiet strength silenced every tongue. When she turned to the crowd, she simply said, "Thank you for coming to honor my husband. Let us bury him with respect." The police escorted her and the children to the front row, their rightful place. Folake sat behind, trembling, her dreams of triumph turned to dust. The service continued, but the atmosphere had shifted. Pastors spoke of life, death, and the vanity of worldly pursuits. The choir sang hymns that echoed through the compound. Cindy's children wept quietly as the coffin was lowered into the ground. Folake watched, her hands clenched in her lap. Every spade of earth that fell on the coffin felt like a nail hammered into her pride. She had built her life on another woman's foundation, and now the truth had been laid bare for all to see. In the days that followed, Folake could not show her face in public without whispers following her. Women who had once envied her now mocked her. Men who had admired her beauty now shook their heads in pity. She thought she had won, they said. But the wife always wins in the end. Folake fell into despair. The humiliation gnawed at her mind, spiraling into anxiety and depression. She withdrew from society, her once loud laughter silenced. Cindy, though scarred by betrayal, walked with renewed strength. She focused on her children, determined to give them a future free from the bitterness of the past. Cindy did not dance on Folake's downfall, nor did she boast about her victory. She carried herself with quiet grace, teaching her children a powerful lesson. Dignity is not in fighting for recognition, but in standing firm in truth. Though her husband had failed her, Cindy emerged stronger, her name vindicated before all. She had fought not with fists, but with faith, patience, and wisdom, and in the end she won. The weeks following Colonel's burial were a blur of condolences, hushed whispers, and the slow settling of dust after a storm. Neighbors who had once pitied Cindy now walked up to her with newfound respect. Church women who had kept their distance began to visit, bringing foodstuffs, wrappers, and small amounts of money for the children. Yet in the quiet of the evenings, when the guests had gone and the compound was silent, Cindy felt the weight of widowhood press upon her chest. Her home felt emptier without Colonel, though his presence had long been absent even before death claimed him. She sat often at the edge of her bed, staring at his photo on the wall. Not because she still loved him the same way, but because he had been part of her journey, her trials, and her story. "Why did you leave me with so much to carry?" she whispered one night, her hands folded tightly in her lap. The children adjusted in their own ways. David, barely 13, took on the role of protector, helping with chores and walking his younger siblings to school. Blessing grew quieter, keeping her emotions buried, while Emmanuel, the youngest, asked endless questions about where Daddy had gone and why. Cindy worked tirelessly at her small tailoring business. Customers began to return, drawn not only by her skill but also by the sympathy they felt for her. Still, the money barely stretched. School fees loomed, rent deadlines approached, and meals were sometimes smaller than they had been before. But Cindy refused to beg. Each time she was tempted to give up, she reminded herself, "My children are watching. They must see strength, not despair." Across town, Folake lived in a different kind of prison. Once the belle of parties and the envy of women, she now hid behind closed curtains. Her phone, once buzzing with invitations, fell silent. Former friends avoided her. Some whispered insults when she passed on the street. "See her," they muttered. "She thought she was a wife. Just a concubine with no honor." The humiliation gnawed at Folek's soul. She stopped attending parties. She neglected her salon business, clients drifting elsewhere. Nights found her curled on her bed, replaying the burial scene in her mind. The police officer reading out Cindy's marriage certificate, the crowd's gasp, Cindy walking with dignity. The shame became unbearable. Depression crept into her heart like a shadow. She stopped eating properly, her once curvy figure wasting away. And worst of all, the people she had mocked now pitied her. That pity stung more than their envy ever had. Cindy's pastor visited her one Sunday afternoon. He found her mending a customer's dress, her children playing quietly nearby. "My daughter," he said gently, "the Lord has carried you through fire and water. Now you must trust Him to bring you into abundance." Cindy smiled faintly. "Pastor, I am trying. But the burden is heavy." He placed his hand on her shoulder. "Your dignity has spoken louder than any sermon. You may not see it now, but your endurance has planted seeds in your children's hearts. One day, you will reap joy from the tears you sow today." Those words stayed with Cindy. Whenever despair threatened to overwhelm her, she repeated them silently. "My endurance is planting seeds. My tears will one day become joy." Months rolled by, and the children began to shine in their own ways. David excelled in mathematics, earning a scholarship to a better school. Blessing discovered her gift for singing, joining the church choir and moving hearts with her clear, angelic voice. Emmanuel, playful and curious, became the joy of the house, reminding them that laughter could exist even in sorrow. Cindy poured herself into them, determined that their future would not be defined by Connell's betrayal or Folek's mockery. She reminded them daily, "You are Adeyemi's. Walk with pride. Walk with God." Meanwhile, Folek sank deeper. Depression turned into bitterness. She blamed Connell for dying and leaving her exposed. She blamed Cindy for stealing the spotlight. She even blamed the crowd for witnessing her shame. One evening, she confided in her only remaining friend, a neighbor who still checked on her. "Sometimes I feel like ending it all. What's left for me? They all laugh at me. Even the woman I mocked now walks like a queen, while I hide like a thief." Her neighbor held her hand firmly. "Folek, don't speak like that. Pride brought you here, but you can still rise if you humble yourself. Go and apologize to Cindy. Make peace." But Folek shook her head violently. "Never. I will never bow to her. I would rather die." Her neighbor sighed. "Then you will remain in chains until you forgive." A year after Connell's burial, the community organized a remembrance service. Both Cindy and Folek were invited. The tension was palpable. Cindy arrived with her children, well-dressed and composed. Folek slipped in quietly, her face thin, her eyes hollow. People glanced at her with pity, but she avoided their gaze. When Cindy was asked to speak, she stood calmly at the podium. "Connell Adeyemi was my husband," she said softly. "He was not perfect. Neither was our marriage. But he gave me children who are my treasure. I will honor his memory, not with bitterness, but by raising these children in truth and dignity. May his soul rest in peace." The hall was silent. Even Folek lifted her head slightly, her eyes glistening with tears. For the first time, Folek saw what true strength looked like. Not in beauty, not in wealth, but in grace under fire. She left the service without speaking, but that night, she wept until her pillow was soaked. The walls of pride around her heart began, slowly, to crack. Life after Connell became a tale of two women, one who rose from betrayal with quiet dignity, and one who fell from pride into despair. Cindy's children grew under the light of her resilience, learning that strength is not loud but steady. Folek's life became a cautionary tale, whispered in the markets and churches. "Do not mock another woman's pain, for tomorrow it may be yours." And so the story lived on, not just in the lives of Cindy and Folake, but in the lessons carried by all who watched. That truth always outlives deception, dignity always outshines pride, and no matter how dark the night, morning always comes. The memory of the remembrance service clung to Folake like a stubborn shadow. Cindy's words, spoken with humility and quiet dignity, rang in her ears each night. I will honor his memory, not with bitterness, but by raising these children in truth and dignity. Those words tore at her heart. They made her question everything she had believed, that beauty, wealth, and charm were enough to secure victory. For the first time in years, she looked into the mirror and did not recognize the woman staring back. Folake stood in front of her dresser one morning, her hands trembling as she touched her hollow cheeks. The vibrant, glowing woman Cunnel had once flaunted in clubs and parties was gone. In her place was a thin, weary figure with sadness etched into every line. "Who are you?" she whispered. The silence of the room pressed in. She thought of the nights she had laughed at Cindy, mocking her illness, her lack of a car, her quiet ways. Now Cindy stood tall, her dignity untouched, while Folake lived as a recluse. The weight of shame was suffocating. One Saturday afternoon, Folake's neighbor, the only friend who had not abandoned her, came knocking again. "Folake," she called, "open this door. You cannot hide forever." Folake reluctantly unlatched the door. The neighbor stepped in, carrying a pot of soup. "You are wasting away," she said, her voice heavy with concern. "How long will you punish yourself?" Folake collapsed into a chair, covering her face. "Do you know what it means to be laughed at by everyone? To be reminded every day that you were never the wife, only the thief?" Her neighbor sighed. "Yes, people talk, but their words cannot destroy you unless you let them. Go to Cindy. Ask her forgiveness. Start fresh." Folake's head shot up. "Ask her forgiveness. The same woman I mocked. The same one I took a husband from." "Yes," the neighbor replied firmly. "That is the only way you will find peace. Pride is killing you faster than any disease." Folake said nothing, but that night she lay awake, restless. Her neighbor's words wrestled with her stubborn pride. Meanwhile, Cindy's life was still far from easy. Though her tailoring business was picking up, her health continued to limit her. She tired quickly, and some days she could barely walk. David, now in senior secondary school, shouldered much responsibility. He studied hard by candlelight, yet still helped at home. Blessing, with her voice like honey, had begun singing at weddings and church programs, bringing in small earnings. Emmanuel remained her sunshine, though his endless questions sometimes pierced Cindy's heart. "Mommy," he asked one evening, "why didn't Daddy love us enough to stay?" Cindy knelt down, pulling him close. "Your father loved you, my son. He just lost his way. But love does not die. I carry enough love for all of you." Emmanuel rested his head against her chest, satisfied for now. But Cindy's heart ached. She knew her children deserved better. The pressure finally exploded one humid evening. Folake had been drinking alone, something she had never done before Cunnel's death. The silence of her house pressed in, and memories of laughter that once filled it now mocked her. In a fit of despair, she smashed a glass against the wall and screamed, "Why me? Why did you leave me, Cunnel? You promised I was your queen. You promised me forever." Her two young children, frightened, began to cry. That sound jolted her like electricity. She stared at their innocent faces, realizing how much they had suffered silently under her depression. That night, she broke down fully, sobbing until her body shook. "I can't do this anymore," she whispered. "I can't carry this hatred. I can't carry this shame." For the first time she prayed, not the shallow prayers she had said at parties or before showing off her wealth, but a raw, desperate cry. "God, if you can hear me, help me. Take this pain. I don't know how to live like this." 2 days later, Folake gathered courage she never thought she had. She dressed simply, tied a plain scarf over her hair, and walked to Cindy's compound. Neighbors watched, whispering in surprise. Cindy was in the yard, supervising David as he washed clothes. When she saw Folake, her eyes narrowed slightly, but her expression remained calm. "Good afternoon," Cindy said evenly. Folake's knees buckled. She dropped to the ground, tears streaming down her face. "Cindy, I came to beg you," she cried. "I mocked you. I took your husband. I lived proudly while you suffered. And look at me now, empty, disgraced, broken. Please forgive me. If not for me, then for these children who did not ask to be born." The compound fell silent. Even David stopped scrubbing, his eyes wide. Cindy's heart pounded. This was the woman who had humiliated her, stolen her husband, and enjoyed the car meant for her. Yet here she was, crumpled on the ground, begging. Cindy inhaled slowly. "I will not lie to you," she said softly. "You wounded me deeply. You laughed when I was weak. You took what was mine. But holding hatred in my heart will only poison me and my children. So I forgive you, Folake." Folake sobbed louder, pressing her forehead against the earth. "But forgiveness," Cindy added firmly, "does not mean friendship. We will live our separate lives. Raise your children well. Let them not repeat our mistakes." Folake nodded vigorously, her tears soaking the soil. Thank you. From that day something shifted. Folake began to rebuild her life slowly. She returned to her salon, attended church quietly, and cared better for her children. She avoided gossip and learned humility. Cindy, though still cautious, felt a weight lift from her heart. Forgiving Folake had not erased the pain, but it freed her from the chains of bitterness. Her children noticed the change. The house felt lighter, her smile more genuine. "Mommy," Blessing whispered one night, "you are the strongest woman I know." Cindy kissed her forehead. "Strength, my daughter, comes not from fighting, but from knowing when to let go." In the months that followed, both women became living lessons in the community. Cindy was admired as the example of resilience and quiet strength. Folake, once mocked, gained respect not for her past, but for her humility in rebuilding. People often said, "See how God works. The wife who was despised is now honored, and the mistress who was proud has been humbled." For Cindy, life was still hard, but her dignity remained her crown. For Folake, the path to redemption was long, but at least she was walking it. And through it all, Connell's story became a warning whispered from mother to daughter, from father to son. Do not despise the one who stands with you when you are nothing. For riches without loyalty will destroy you. The morning sun rose slowly over the Lagos skyline, casting a golden glow across Cindy's compound. The children were already awake, their laughter echoing through the halls. David was helping Emmanuel with breakfast, while Blessing hummed softly as she prepared for a church performance. Cindy watched them from the veranda, her hands resting lightly on the railing. Her spine still ached, and her legs could not carry her as far as they once had, but today she felt a peace she had never known. For years she had endured betrayal, humiliation, and heartbreak. She had lost a husband, faced the mockery of a sidechick, and carried the burden of raising children largely on her own. Yet here she was, alive, strong, and quietly victorious. Cindy's life had never been about wealth or recognition. She had worked as a nurse, yes, but she had never owned a car or indulged in luxury. When Connell betrayed her, it was not the loss of money or comfort that hurt most. It was the betrayal of trust, the violation of years spent building a life together. Yet she had endured. She had raised her children with dignity. She had foregone bitterness. She had relied on faith and quiet perseverance. And now, even Folake, the woman who had stolen her husband, flaunted her successes, and mocked her struggles, was humbled, struggling with depression, and learning the hard way that pride and deception cannot stand against truth and resilience. Cindy had won not with anger nor confrontation, but with patience, wisdom, and grace. Her 3 children had grown remarkably under her care. David, disciplined and bright, had received multiple academic awards and earned a scholarship to study engineering, the very path his father had once walked. Cindy's heart swelled with pride. "Mommy," David said one evening, handing her a neatly folded school report. "I want to be like you. Not just smart but strong like you are." Blessing had blossomed into a talented singer, her voice drawing crowds at church and community events. Emmanuel, playful and clever, was always asking questions, always exploring, always reminding Cindy that joy could exist even in hardship. Each child carried a piece of her strength, a reflection of her patience and her love. Cindy had not only survived, she had nurtured life, dignity, and hope. Cindy's perseverance did not go unnoticed. Neighbors began to seek her advice, admiring the way she had handled her husband's betrayal and the Sidechick's mockery. The women in her community, who once whispered behind her back, now came to her openly, asking how she had endured and risen above humiliation. "Cindy," one woman said, folding her hands, "you have shown us all what it means to be a wife, a mother, and a woman of strength. Your life teaches us more than any sermon could." Cindy smiled gently. "Endurance is the key. Faith and patience do more than anger ever can." Even Folake, still fragile and recovering from depression, had begun to rebuild quietly. She had returned to her work, humbled, and was learning slowly that respect and redemption could only come through humility. Cindy did not chase wealth or fame. She continued her tailoring business, expanded it slowly, and invested in her children's education. She remained involved in the church, supporting widows and single mothers. Her home, modest yet comfortable, reflected warmth, love, and care, everything she had built with her own hands and patience. Sometimes, when she walked slowly through the house, watching sunlight fall across her children's faces, she thought of Connell, not with bitterness, but as a chapter that had taught her resilience, faith, and the power of quiet endurance. One evening, Cindy sat alone on the veranda, the sky painted in shades of orange and pink. She whispered a prayer of gratitude. "Lord," she said softly, "thank you for carrying me through the storms. Thank you for giving me strength when I had none, wisdom when I was tempted to hate, and patience when my heart ached. May my children walk in the path of righteousness and learn from the trials of my life." She looked across the street to Folake's house, where the Sidechick now lived in quiet obscurity. Cindy did not feel triumph or glee. She felt relief. Relief that justice, in its own time, had spoken. Relief that she had kept her dignity intact. Relief that the story of her life would not be defined by betrayal, but by grace, endurance, and strength. Cindy's victory was silent but powerful. She did not boast. She did not parade herself. Yet everyone who knew the story, the community, her children, her extended family, understood the truth. Cindy had endured. Cindy had won. Her children carried her legacy forward. They saw that strength is not in retaliation, but in rising above, in teaching others through example, in living honorably even when life deals a cruel hand. The story of Cindy Adeyemi became a lesson whispered across neighborhoods and communities. True victory is not measured by wealth, beauty, or power, but by dignity, patience, and the courage to persevere through betrayal. Years passed. Cindy's hair began to streak with gray, and her children grew taller than her. David became a young man of promise. Blessing's voice brought joy to hundreds, and Emmanuel's curiosity knew no bounds. She watched them, her heart full. She did not need wealth, applause, or revenge. She had her children, her faith, and her dignity. And in that quiet, unshakable peace, Cindy Adeyemi realized that life, even when cruel and unjust, had rewarded her the most important treasure: the victory of grace, the power of patience, and the enduring strength of a woman who refused to be broken. Cindy never spoke publicly about Connell or Folake. She never flaunted her triumph. Yet in every step she took, every word she whispered to her children, and every life she touched in her community, the message was clear: endure, trust, forgive, live with dignity, and the world will witness your victory, even when you do not shout it aloud. And so, the story ended. Not with loud applause nor public vindication, but with the quiet, enduring triumph of a woman who had walked through fire and emerged unscathed. Cindy Adeyemi had lost much, but she had gained everything that truly mattered. In the end, it wasn't wealth, power, or revenge that defined Cindy's life. It was love, grace, and the unbreakable bond with her children. Her journey proves that even in the darkest moments, hope and resilience can light the way. If you enjoyed this story and you would like to see more stories like this one, make sure to subscribe, like, and turn on your notification icon so you will never miss out ever.